This podcast is part of the SJ Network. Go to s-j-network.com for more great podcasts and for contact information on publicist Steve Joyner.
You are listening to In a City Like Yours, a semi-monthly podcast featuring interesting people with interesting life stories. This podcast may contain language and/or subject matter not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm your host, Michael Glenn Moore. If you have an interesting life story and would like to appear on the show, please drop me a note at inacitylikeyours@gmail.com. Also, join our Facebook page at In a City Like Yours Podcast to receive notices of new releases and other info. Now, please welcome today's guest.
Hi, my name is John Orlando. I am in Columbus, Ohio, and I would like to talk about an event that pretty much made me the person that I am today. And that situation was pretty easy for me to pick out. That was the death of my father. When I was 18 years old, my father had passed away. And I think that it really shaped who I am to this day because of the tragic nature of it. So my dad had been a man that had been sick for quite a while. Actually, when he was much younger, he was one of the very first in our region or our part of Eastern Ohio to have an artificial valve put in his heart because his had originally worn out. His original one wore out, and from a childhood illness, and so he had been sick, but he felt well for many, many years, but eventually that valve started to wear out. And so around 1993, 1992, 1993 is when he passed away. But about 1992, 1991, he had started to not feel good. And so we went to the doctors and they said, hey, it's wearing out, this artificial valve. So we're going to replace it with another one. And so that should fix things. You should have, much more time on your hands, much more life to live. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. In the spring of 1993, in May, my dad went in for the surgery and didn't recover, to be honest. For the first few days, he did really, really well, and then all of a sudden, just the bottom fell out, and he struggled to stay alive. And multiple times that year when I was 18 years old, it's the summer of my 18-year-old self, and many times we had to prepare for the worst because we were told things were looking bleak. And he did pass away in August of 1993, and it was kind of hard. It was really hard because I think that I was kind of, I don't want to say sheltered from death, but I kind of didn't really, it didn't have the impact when other relatives had passed away, whether it was great aunts or great uncles, or even my grandfather, who I didn't really know because he died when I was very, very young. But this had a profound impact on not only me, but my family. Because my brother and I have a lot of years between us because so my dad was married very, very young in life and was married for a while, and then had 4 kids, got divorced, and then met my mom. And so my mom was 15 years younger than he was. So he was 45, my mom was 30. So for me, I was kind of in this weird spot where I had brothers and sisters, but they were so much older than me that we kind of didn't relate. I mean, I guess that's not It's not being derogatory, and that's not being disrespectful. It's just, that's what it was. I mean, for crying out loud, we were like a whole half generation, between the two of us. But that changed, and that it changed for the better, to be honest. That was the one thing that I always am very thankful for, that, my father passed on, my brother and I became closer. We got to kind of understand each other better. And, I matured a lot, in that process too. So I think that was one really big positive that came out of the tragedy. But it shaped me for who I am today. I think that had my father not passed away, probably I would not be here in Columbus, Ohio. I think that I would have maybe stayed put in the eastern part of Ohio, maybe western PA, but I would have stayed a little bit closer back there. I'm not so sure that I would be doing what I'm doing, which is, podcasting as a hobby and as a creative outlet. I think my life would look radically different had this set of circumstances not fell upon my family. So I think that is pretty much kind of my story, is the biggest impact. I mean, it also impacted me on maybe a smaller scale, in that I was going to a local college that was a mere 15 minutes from my home. And my original plan was I was just going to stay there for a year and then transfer out to go somewhere else. But it kind of became, a little bit of it kind of got to a point where, after spending a year at college, I really liked it there, and I had made friends, and I felt like I still also could help my mom, because she was still, we were still all living back there, and help her with it. So as a smaller, and I'm sorry, I should have thought about that, but that as a smaller little item of how it impacted me, changing my career, or not my career, my collegiate path was another impact. But, it's been a long time since my dad passed away, but I still think about him quite frequently. And I think that he would be very proud of how I turned out. All those lessons that he instilled in me, be independent. Don't let people tell you can't do things. Work hard. Do the best job you can, or otherwise don't bother doing it. All those life lessons are still within me, and so that my friend is my story.
Well, I think losing a parent is a really hard thing to go through. So it's not unusual for you to still be tender when that comes to that aspect.
Yeah.
And they say probably the hardest thing is to lose a child. But a parent, we all go through it. It's something that's inevitable. We're all going to die, and at some point our parents are going to pass away, and it's not something I look forward to. My mother's 85 years old, and she's getting up there, and I'm really worried about, especially with the COVID going on now.
Mm-hmm.
But what you said, your father's problem with his heart was something that happened to him when he was a child, an illness that happened to him when he was a child. What was that?
It was called rheumatic fever. It was, I don't remember all the symptoms of it, but they didn't catch it right away. That's the thing I do remember, is they didn't catch it right off the bat, and that's what damaged the heart. I don't remember all the symptoms and everything, but that's the one thing I do remember, was that had they caught it a couple of months beforehand, then probably this would never have happened. They would have treated it, and then things probably, he would have been sick, but probably would have gotten better from it. But it was the fact that it went undetected for a while, that the whatever the infection or whatever had settled in and damaged his heart.
So he was in his late 40s when he passed away?
No, he was, I got to do the math, 63.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he didn't have any problems up until his later years with his heart when they had to put the valve in. So
Correct.
it was damaged, but it was at such a state that he didn't have to have anything done until
Correct.
later on.
Correct.
Yeah.
Actually, I can tell you the year. It was 1980. I was 5 years old when he had the first valve put in. So at that point, he would have been, 50 years old. So still very young. And yeah, he did things. He did really, really well for those from 1980 till I said like 1991-ish, 1992-ish. He did things, and that I guess is the stubbornness that I inherited, or that industrial spirit that I inherited. You know, he was told, look, you shouldn't do a lot of strenuous stuff, but I'll be damned if he wasn't. Still the guy out there, you know, chopping down trees and you know, making you know, a new driveway and doing all this stuff that, you know, he was kind of, his doctor said, yeah, you know, maybe you shouldn't do that, but he wasn't going to let that hold him down. You know, and I think that's where I get this kind of this independent spirit from, is that, you know, don't tell me I can't do something, I'm going to go do it. And so he even though he had the heart surgery in 1980, he lived a pretty good life up until, you know, 1991 or 1992-ish.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about your artistic career, and you know, with podcasting. Yeah. I noticed behind you have a Deadpool poster. Are you a really big fan of cartoons and comics?
Oh yeah, I love comics. Ever since I was a kid, I collected comics. Although my collecting back then was a little bit different because there were so many like toy tie-ins. So G.I. Joe for me was the comic book. I have a gigantic truckload of G.I. Joe comics from the 80s. So that's basically how I started. But then I kind of started, I had a cousin that collected comics, and he started suggesting others. And so I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to check those out. And I've been a fan ever since I was a kid. And I often say this too, because to me, I think this goes hand in hand. I loved comics. I love pro wrestling. I mean, just, it's like, there's no other addiction that I, that is quite like it. But I love those two things because to me, they go hand in hand. Like, pro wrestling to me is a live action comic book, you know? You, in theory, can't really reach out and touch Superman, right? So, you know, because Michael, it's if you're touching Superman, it's an actor. It's Henry Cavill, or it's, you know what I mean? Where when you touch Hulk Hogan, that's to an extent really Hulk Hogan. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I became captivated by pro wrestling as a kid.
You know, for some reason, I never got into pro wrestling. I'm 59, and back when I was a kid, you know, it was very popular and everything, and a lot of my friends were into it, but for some reason, I just never made that connection. But I know a lot of people who have, and it's something that, do you think from, you know, how old are you now?
I'm 45.
From 45. Okay. Has it changed much in your lifetime so far? From what
yeah. Yeah, it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot in my lifetime of watching. Yeah, just the style's a little bit different now. There's a lot more flash and pizzazz, and there's a, you know, sadly, you know, when you watch old wrestling, sometimes you're like, ooh, we really said that. That's kind of a little bit of a no-no now in 2020. You can't say that, you know. So yeah, it's changed a little bit. It's changed quite a bit, actually. Yeah, but I loved it so much that I started working in the business. When I graduated college, I moved to Columbus. I was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and let's try it. And so I went to a tryout camp in Cincinnati from a very reputable promoter. And I knew it was going to be tough, Michael. I knew it was going to be hard, really, really hard. And I'm not really that great of an athlete to begin with, so that was one strike against me. So I kind of knew I had my work cut out for me. But that weekend, I got the snot kicked out of me. And at the end of the weekend, the promoter said, well, what do you think? And I said, man, sir, this is 10 times tougher than I thought it was going to be. And I thought it was going to be like tough. Like, I thought on a scale of 1 to 10, it was going to be a 10. It was going to be extremely tough. But man, it's like 35 on this scale. And so he said to me, he said, well, do you still want to do something in the business? I was like, yes, I do. And he said, well, you have a great voice. You know that. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, have you ever thought about doing ring announcing or play-by-play? And I go, well, I have. And he's like, well, all I can do is give you some advice. Find somewhere to work and just do it. And so I found a place to work here in Columbus. There was a new company that started up. They needed somebody. So I started with them. They lasted about 8 months to a year. They went out of business. Another company in Columbus came along, and I worked for them for their 5 or 6 months that they were around. And right when they closed, there was a wrestler at the independent level here in Ohio, Big Guns Jeff Cannon. He was running, he was going to run a school and a promotion in kind of, I kind of define it as it's like not quite northeastern Ohio, but it's kind of in between the central part of the state and the northeast part, like in that kind of rural area out there. And he was like, you want to come out? And I'm like, yeah. And I was out there for the entire run of that company, which was about 13 years. And I thought that I was going to hang it up for a while, Michael, but as the old Godfather line is, they drag you right back in. And there's a couple companies here in Columbus that started up. One about a year and a half ago, the other one about 5 years ago. And they said, hey, you know, we don't need ring announcer, but we do need a play-by-play guy. And I jumped at the chance because it's a little bit different for me to do. And, so I'm still 18 years in, I'm still doing it. Which blows my mind.
Doing what you do is very involving. So if you're probably in it more than you would have been as a wrestler, you know, because you're in every game.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Have you talked to Christopher Stolle yet?
I have. I've talked to Chris.
You said wrestling and that you want to be a wrestler and everything. I thought of him, thinking, oh, these guys need to get together. But I'm glad to hear that you've talked to him.
Here's the funny part too. We have not had enough time to play this game, but I guarantee the wrestling world is so big but yet so small that I guarantee, even though he worked in Colorado and he worked out in Philadelphia, I guarantee he and I have worked with somebody and we've crossed paths that way in some, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon separation type of deal. But we haven't had a chance to sit down and do that. But I was like, we need to, man. We need to figure out who we know, in conjunction.
Really? And I want to mention Steve Joyner, who I'm sure got you this interview, and with Chris. He's a publicist who works out of California, and he gets a lot of my interviews and Christopher Stolle's interviews, and you're somebody who he has as a client, and that's how we made our connection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been working with Steve since I believe the beginning of August, and Steve's a great dude. He is a very good dude. I appreciate the fact that he I think is a year younger than me, but we have that same sensibility, and that's what I like. The same sensibilities about life and philosophy and whatnot. So yeah, he's a great dude.
Okay, let's talk about your podcast. What's
Sure.
What's it called, and what is it about?
Okay, well, I have a podcast, and it has a very, very lengthy explanation behind the name because everybody asks about the name. But the podcast is called the PVDCast. When I got in, or when I broke into the wrestling world, I was asked by the very first promoter I ever worked for, hey, we're going to put you on the website. Okay, cool. So we need a photo. We need this, and this. I'm like, okay, you got to fill out this paper. Cool. All right. The paper was very, name, height, weight, where you're from, blah, 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 blah. And I sat there. I was like, okay, sweet. So I filled stuff out. John Orlando, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, hometown. Well, Columbus, Ohio. That'd be easy. Well, the thing was, Michael, as I looked on the website, I would have been the 5th guy from Columbus, Ohio. And I'm like, I don't want to be the 5th guy from Columbus, Ohio. So I sat and I thought for a while. And personally, my mother, after my father passed away, she moved to Providence, Rhode Island. and she's lived up there since 1996. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to call Providence, Rhode Island home, because I know the city. She's been up there forever. I know, all the places. So I put that down, and so started going by that. So fast forward to 2012, when I start my podcast, I'm like, what am I going to call it? And I came up with the idea that the airport code for Providence is PVD. And I'm like, PVD podcast, PVDcast, that might not be a bad idea. Let's go with that. And I soon discovered there's no one else, there's no one else that has a name anyway similar to it for a podcast. So I'm like, there you go. That's what we're going to stick with. So that's the story of the PVDcast name. I've been doing it since December of 2012. I like to really kind of focus on my favorite things to talk about: comics and wrestling and movies and hockey. And though every once in a while I get some guests that maybe are outside those parameters, but most of them are, in that little bubble. And it's fun. I've enjoyed it. I'm sure that, Michael, you could probably empathize with me and say that indeed I am correct. Those first few episodes are rough, aren't they?
Yeah, but you can only get better. So that's the good thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I'm a DIY guy. I never went to college for communications or broadcast or anything like that. So literally building this podcast from the ground up just by reading articles, watching YouTube videos. I did take one podcasting class at the local community college that, to be honest, when I look back on it, I'm like, wow, that was a waste of money. You could have learned all of that stuff on YouTube, but you don't know. So you think, I'll spend $75 on this, Friday and Saturday class. Okay. But you didn't really learn much. But yeah, and I've had a whole host of great guests. I'm on episode 253. So I'm very proud that I got to 250 episodes. I feel like that's a huge accomplishment, and I just love it.
That is a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
So are you on once a week, 3 times a month, or what's your schedule?
Once a week. I've been once a week now. We've been doing once a week I've been doing, I should say, once a week now for about 2 years. So it's been good. Before that, I tried to at least get 2 up a month. And so for the longest time, Michael, I was good at getting 3 out. And I'm like, yes, I'm, because I only wanted to get 2 out. So I'm getting 3 out. So that's great. And just started clicking that I got the rhythm down, and I could start getting 4, one a week done in a month. And so, just been rolling ever since then with that.
How do you feel about editing? Do you just put your podcast out as is, or do you edit?
No, I edit because I feel like, again, going back to what we talked about with my dad, either do it right, do it to the best of your ability, or don't do it. And so I do edit. I get rid of, some of the uhs and ums that we all do. Here, I just did it.
I do too. I'm the same way.
I try to clean up the audio the best that I can too. I'm sure you can understand. Sometimes you get that interview that's really good, but man, oh man, is it a pistol to get cleaned up because of whatever.
Yeah, it's. I spend a lot of time editing myself, and that's kind of what's keeping me from doing any more than 2 a month. I try to get in, or at least my goal is to get in more than 2, have maybe a bonus episode each month. But, this year hasn't happened that way. Last year I was able to, from October through December, put out 4 episodes a month with, 2 episodes, my normal episodes, and 2 bonus episodes. So that's something I'm trying to do. But if it wasn't for editing, I think I would be fine. But I just cannot let the ohs and ums go. It's so hard for me to just give up that.
I just listened to one on the way to work today, and the guest coughed 3 times. And I understand sometimes we got to cough. I just did it a little bit ago. But I'm like, dude, edit that out. You can't just leave that in there. You should take a few minutes and clip that stuff out. That sounds really bad, you know?
Yeah, when you coughed earlier, the first thing I thought of was, okay, that's editing. Post-production will take care of that.
Yeah, you know, and while I do like to keep the PVDcast very like conversational, I don't really like to do like interview question answer. I like to keep it more conversational and, you know, hey, we can go talk about this topic, that, you know, we can get off topic and go wherever you want to go, and you know, say whatever you want to say. It's fine. So I don't like to keep it real tight in terms of content. But, you know, again, if somebody maybe says something that might be a little bit like controversial, I'll be like, maybe we need to clip that out. But yeah, editing is, I don't hate it. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I'm indifferent about it. Like I've talked to other podcasters like, man, I hate editing. It's the worst part, blah, blah, blah. I talked to another one that was like, I get kind of in a, like he explained it like he gets in a Zen mode where he just like focuses in on the, you know, on the track, and he just, you know, he just gets into the rhythm. And I can understand that too. I'm just kind of in the middle. Like I'm indifferent to it. Like I don't hate it. I don't love it, but it is what it is. It's what I want to do to put out a good product. So.
Yeah, I definitely do the same. I get into a zone when it comes to editing and putting the show together. So it's something I actually enjoy. It just takes, you know, time from, you know, what I could be doing if I just, you know, let it go. Because I know a lot of podcasters that do that, and I just don't understand how they can do that, because I have too much, I guess, anal retentiveness in me that, you know, I can't just record an episode and just let it go. Are majority of your shows with a guest, or do you do some that are just you?
At times I would do what I called mini episodes with just me. But I mean, I've been on a streak where there's been a guest. Yeah. I mean, mine are predominantly guest oriented. You know, when I started it was very easy, Michael, because I had, hey, do you want to come on? You know, so-and-so, you just had a great match this past weekend. You want to come on and talk about it? Yeah, sure, man. You know, I also had a very good friend that's in the local indie comic book circles, and he spread the word. He was like, hey, you know, John's got this podcast. I just was on it. It's a fun time. And because he gave me that stamp of approval, a lot of guys were like, oh, hey, I got this comic that's coming out in a month. Can we talk? Yeah, come on, let's talk about it, you know? And so it just kind of grew from there. And when I did do my solo episodes, I kept them to like 15 minutes, like 15 to 20 minutes. I didn't go on for me, typically 45 minutes to 50 minutes is an episode for me. But I felt like nobody wants to kind of hear me go on and on and on for 45 minutes. So I tried to cut them in half and just kind of talk about a few things and go from there.
So what would you say was your best interview?
Okay. Can I ask best as in my favorite that I've done?
Yeah. Your personal favorite.
Personal favorite is an easy answer. 2 years ago in 2018, there was a big wrestling convention here in Columbus. You know, a lot of the older wrestlers were there. There was like 30 of them. And I got a chance to go, and I got a chance to talk to 5 great superstars from the past: Tito Santana, Cowboy Bob Orton Jr., One Man Gang, Tatanka, and then Road Warrior Animal, who for me as a kid growing up, I love the Road Warriors. They are the greatest tag team of all time. And the opportunity to talk to him for like 5 minutes was fantastic. And so that is my favorite episode that I've ever done. In fact, it's so, I just just coincidentally, I re-released it just because I was not quite finished with an episode I think it was in March. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm just going to replay that one because I love it so much. So episode 228 or episode 165, it actually has 2 numbers. The rebroadcast was 228, but that's my favorite.
What would you consider your lowest point? You have to have one.
Yeah.
If it's not the first 2.
Man. I think I will go with what I jokingly called the lost episode of the PVDcast. It's lost because the individual that I interviewed, we were supposed to meet, and here in Columbus, we have a great library system. So anytime that I wanted to record live with somebody, I would just meet them at the library, and I just check out one of the boardrooms, and we just sit down there and go from there. Then that, you know, because it's a neutral site, it's in public. You know, if you're like, I don't know who this dude is, you know what I mean? Like, I understand that. I understand the hesitation. So this young lady had said, yeah, I'll meet you at this library. And I'm like, cool. All right. Well, get to the library. She no-shows. I checked my email. She had emailed like very last minute. It was like, can we just record remotely? There's some things that happened. Okay, cool. So I got back home and I set everything up and we're going to record. And oh my God, the quality of the Skype was horrific. And I'm sitting there going, oh, I don't know about this. So we wrapped and I said, look, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I'm going to try to clean this audio up, but it's pretty bad. And if I can clean it up, I'll release it. But if it's trash, I'm just deleting it. And this individual, she was not going to be in the country. She was going back to where she was from. So she was just in Ohio visiting family. So there was a little bit of a timetable. But Michael, it was terrible. I could not, no matter what I did, it still sounded like absolute garbage. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm not releasing this. I'm just, forget about it. I deleted it. I'm like, it's going to be the lost episode. So I think that's probably going to be the lowest one. That one was frustrating, aggravating, and disappointing.
I imagine the way you do it by meeting in libraries and so forth gives you more control over sound. So that's a really cool thing. I mean, you have mics for your guest and so forth. I mean, I enjoy talking to other podcasters because they usually have their own setup. So I know that the sound quality is going to be fine. Otherwise, I'm dependent on Zoom or Skype. And that's when you have the problem is when someone's talking on their laptop and they have, you know, they're too far away and you can't get them close enough because they don't understand what you're saying. So it can be a mess.
It can be. And unfortunately, we're stuck in this cycle. That's kind of how we want to do it. If we, you know, want to be cautious when it comes to COVID, you know, this is the way that we have to do it now for the time being, which, you know, I don't know when's the next time. In fact, here in Columbus, our library is just open. Like literally 2 days ago, like they've been closed. So you could just drive through and pick stuff up, but you couldn't go in. So, you know, everything's been done remotely. You know, I kind of use a different program. I use Uber Conference. I'll just throw it out there. I'll give them a cheap plug. Uber Conference is great, especially if you're doing like audio only. I've never had any problems with Uber Conference other than 2 instances. One was somebody was on their cell phone because they could call in and the cell phone, that was the problem, not Uber Conference. And then more recently, there was somebody that was having some computer issues and it was tricky. But other than that, I've been with Uber Conference for a couple of years and they're fantastic.
I'll have to look them up.
Yeah, uberconference.com. They have a free version, then they have a pay version. And I will be 100% honest. I've used the free version a couple of times and it was still great. I got the pay version because it gives you free international calling. And I was starting to get a couple of requests from some people that were in the Philippines, you know, an author in Italy, a couple of creators over in England. And I'm like, well, the price was not that bad, to be honest with you. I was like, yeah, that's not bad for, you know, being able to have that flexibility. So
yeah, that was going to be my next question is, are most of your interviews local to Columbia? But obviously you're worldwide when it comes to your interviews now, right?
Oh yeah, I've had a great comic book artist, if I can just give him a plug real quick, Erwin Arosa in the Philippines. I talked to him. He was on the podcast. Francesca Cavallo was an author that was in Italy that she was on earlier. And the crew from 892 Art Studio over in England, Damien and Helena, they were guests And of course, Paul Ross. I almost forgot about Paul. I can't forget about him. He's a filmmaker in England as well. So yeah, I've branched out a little bit. I mean, so do you oftentimes, I don't know what you use for your distribution, but I use Libsyn. Do you sometimes, Michael, get like baffled by what somebody in so-and-so listened to an episode?
All the time. I like going through that. I use Podbean, and they have really good analytics, and you can tell which countries your listeners are coming from. Majority of mine are from the United States, but then there are, other countries that, little countries like Uzbekistan or whatever, that,
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, at least I got somebody, around the world listening to it.
Right. You just wonder, you're like, Uzbekistan, how did that happen? It does make you scratch your head a little bit, doesn't it?
So these, your interviews, do they come to you, or do you hunt them down?
A little bit of both. Just as a matter of fact, episode 251, I talked to a artist by the name of David Whalen. He's got an independent imprint called Correct Handed Comics, and he reached out to me actually in the middle of August, and was like, hey, I stumbled across your podcast. I really dig it. You got a lot of cool people on there talking about comics. I'd like to come on. So yeah, so I think it's kind of both. I do quite a few inquiries. Some folks definitely touch base with me. A lot of, especially with comic book creators, I've built rapport with them. So, they may be on in April, and then the following May, hey, John, I got another book coming out. Come on, you can come on. We'll talk about it, So, yeah, it's pretty much, I'd say about equal.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question that's probably something you've either been asked before or someone else has, talked about it, but it's kind of a common question. Who would you like most to interview, living or dead?
Oh, living or dead. Oh. Okay, I got it. Again, a kid of the 80s. I loved early hip hop. And I love Public Enemy. So I would pick Chuck D to be a guest.
Interesting. Okay.
I would. I think that a couple of things. I think number one, he's very philosophical, and I'd like to get his philosophy on things. I also think that he brings a certain aura about him that I think would be really cool to experience and chat with him about. His life and that. So he would be, and again, it would be like a childhood hero again, kind of like Road Warrior Animal, like an opportunity to sit down with somebody that you like, man, I have all your albums and and whatnot. And so there you go. I'd go Chuck D. Okay,
let's talk about something else now. Let's talk about the movies.
Okay.
Specifically comic turn movies. What is your universe? Are you Marvel, or what turns you on as far as what's going on with the movies these days?
I'm straight Marvel. I gotta be honest. There's only been a couple of good DC comics movies. I am the guy that kind of takes Batman and sets it to the side. I kind of feel like I know it's DC, but those kind of are off to their own. But yeah, I'm Marvel. I'm definitely a Marvel guy. But I like all kinds of films. I'm indie films, big giant blockbusters. I think the only two genres I'm not a big fan of is I'm not a big fan of horror, and I'm just not a big fan of musicals. I don't know why. Those two genres kind of like eh. But yeah, I like a lot of different movies.
How about television series? Things like, what is the Umbrella Academy and things like that. You spend a lot of time watching TV series, especially on Netflix. So they have a lot of Marvel shows on Netflix and so forth.
Yeah, I like. See, here's where I'll differ. I feel DC does a better job with their TV product than Marvel does. See, I think Marvel's got the formula for doing movies. Whereas I feel DC has the formula for doing TV shows, because I like The Flash. I like Black Lightning. Stargirl was fun. I enjoyed that. So those shows I dig. I never got into the Umbrella Academy just yet, but I am waiting just another. I'm waiting at least another couple weeks to get to season 2 of The Boys on Amazon.
Yeah, I've been wanting to watch that as well. I haven't watched it.
Yeah, season 1 was fantastic, so I'm really waiting. I'm kind of waiting for them to be done because they're releasing them once a week, and I'm like, come on, I want to binge them. Let's just get it all out,
Yeah, that's funny. I'm the same way. I like to binge. Anything that has more than 2 seasons, I'm all for.
Yeah. And I kind of need to. I made the joke, but I kind of need to refill the list from quarantine because I caught up on a lot of stuff that I wanted to see, that for some odd reason slipped through the cracks or whatnot, and I got like a lot checked off the list, we'll say.
Okay. Is there anything you want to discuss that we haven't talked about yet?
You know what? Actually, Michael, could I talk about a small side project, a podcasting project? Okay. Something that started this summer, probably because of boredom and coronavirus. There is another great podcast here in Columbus, the Three Geeks podcast, and we oftentimes co-collaborate. And Jason Taylor, who is the man behind that podcast, he and I share a guilty pleasure. And that guilty pleasure is watching the old TV show Matlock. Andy Griffith as your grandfatherly lawyer. And we talk about it all the time. And some of the other guys on the show were like, geez, guys, you're just stop talking about Matlock. And so the idea came that we should do our own Matlock podcast. So we started in June. And basically what we did was we got season 1 and we're watching each episode and we kind of do a little critique of it. We discuss it, we review it, we poke a little fun at it. And it's been a blast. And the surprising thing is, Michael, it's done pretty well. I just kind of figured, Matlock is an older show for older people. I don't know why he and I like it so much. And so I was like, old people aren't going to listen to podcasts, right? I mean, I don't want to be stereotypical, but old people and technology don't mix, right?
That's funny. I remember hearing about the Three Geeks podcast through the Steve Joyner Network, and I think I heard about the Matlock episodes.
Did you? You heard about MatTalk? We called it MatTalk, and we've done 8 episodes so far. We release 2 a month on the second and fourth month, the second and fourth Monday of every month. And I'll be 100% honest. I'm like, if we get 30 people to check this out, cool. This is just for giggles. You know what I mean? We're not really doing this, for any other reason than we're just doing it just for giggles. And Jason always is like, dude, do you know what our new numbers are? No. And they're in the triple digits. I'm like, wait, what? There's how many people listening? It just kind of was a shock because, again, we did it just as kind of a goof, and it's done pretty well. So we're going to keep on doing it. And I'm going to say this publicly, and I really do mean it. My goal that I would really, really like to do with MatTalk is I would like to do one of the recordings live from, there's a nursing home about 2 minutes from my house. And I really honestly feel like if COVID hadn't happened, that was going to be in the plans, is I would like to go over there and kind of pay back to those people, give them some entertainment, give them some interaction with somebody different, and kind of record an episode live, like we'll watch it live and record it. And I really would like to do that. It's a future goal for that podcasting project.
That'd be really cool. Now, is Matlock still in syndication, or?
Oh yeah, it's still on. It's on MeTV, and then every few months, Hallmark Channel does like a weekend marathon of Matlock. So.
You get to binge.
Yeah, you do.
Well, let's go ahead and why don't you give out your social media and websites and things like that, so my listeners can find you.
Cool. You can find the PVDcast over at pvdcast.com, which is the online home of yours truly. But you can also find it through all those major podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio app, all of the big names. Just, go to your favorite podcast place, go in the search bar, PVDcast, or sometimes you have to put PVDcast John Orlando, and you should find it. You can find me on Twitter under my personal handle of @PVDMVP, but you can leave messages if you'd like. And please check out the Facebook and Instagram for the podcast, which is @PVDcast. MatTalk real quick is available through Anchor FM, anchor.fm/MatTalk. It's also available through all those major podcasting platforms too. The Facebook page, and that's the only thing we have social media wise right now. The Facebook page is @MatTalk, MatTalk podcast. So jump on over if you're a fan of Andy Griffith and Matlock and check it out. Every Monday night at 8 o'clock through the Facebook page of the PVDcast, I do kind of a live broadcast of that week's episode. So if you say, I don't know if I want to download it, well, check it out through Facebook.
I want to give a shout out to Ben, the editor of this show. Ben also has a podcast called Two Marks and a Spark. You can find it wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Check it out. You won't be sorry.